Darren Van Dam here with another list of underrated movies you can currently catch for free on Tubi. Don't worry if you don't like Tubi, if you don't like the ads or the fact that they're restricted to 720p, if you know what that means. Because typically movies on Tubi are available on your paid streaming services as well. So be on the lookout. Up here near the title, I'm going to show you where else you might be able to stream these movies, but they're all currently free on Tubi here in the US. And on this list, I've got an intense Woody Allen thriller, a Nicolas Cage movie about a witch, another witch movie starring Kate Hudson, and then we're going to end this list with some of my top picks, which are easily some of the best hidden gem movies you can currently catch for free on Tubi. Thanks to Oslo Sleep for sponsoring this video, but we're going to start this off with that Woody Allen thriller. Now, on recent videos, I've recommended the film Match Point, which stars Scarlett Johansson, another Woody Allen thriller that I do rank a bit higher than Cassandra's Dream, but this was the movie he followed up Match Point with, and it seems like he's still trying to get some of his ideas out, some of these dark, macabre ideas. Colin Farrell and Ewan McGregor play brothers in this movie, brothers who have some serious financial problems, but they have a wealthy uncle who promises to give them a bunch of his inheritance money if they do some misdeeds for him. That's where I'll leave it. But this movie is surprisingly dark, and not in a big overbearing way. Actually, the filmmaking here is pretty subtle. You would never, ever suspect in your wildest dreams that this is a Woody Allen movie. Even though it's my last pick on the list, I do recommend it strongly for people who like, you know, thinky thrillers. Another surprisingly intense movie that's not nearly as thinky is A Man Apart, starring Vin Diesel. This is one of the few serious roles that he took. Now, he's in some serious movies, like you might forget he was in Saving Private Ryan, but as far as leading roles go, he only did a handful of movies like this, Man Apart being a pretty excellent, ultimately revenge movie. It's over 20 years old, it's a little bit formulaic as you might expect, but if you can brush some of that stuff aside, this actually ends up being a, again, surprisingly intense cop revenge drama, and Vin Diesel, you know, he does excellent work in it. I'm honestly surprised he didn't get into even more movies like this, but, you know, he just nails that Fast and the Furious thing kind of perfectly.
I've been told.
Now, quickly before the Nicolas Cage Witch movie, which is coming up next, these St. Nicholas shirts are available. The shirts are incredibly soft, and my wife and I do all the designs together and have a lot of fun doing it. And it's just a great way to show off that you've got great taste in movies. Heck, you might even get spotted in public wearing one of them. It's the only way people would know that you also watch this channel, because DarrenVanDam.com is the only place you can get them. But Season of the Witch is a kind of medieval, dark fantasy movie starring Nicolas Cage.
You must deliver the witch to the Abbey of Severac, where you destroy the witch's powers.
Can so much be entrusted to him?
Oh, he will not be alone.
Now notice I did call it a fantasy movie. This one deals with a lot of supernatural elements. You're not getting like a true blue witch movie with this, but it centers around a few knights in the 14th century transporting a prisoner to a monastery. The prisoner is actually played by Claire Foy, and then some dark supernatural stuff starts happening. And you know, this is a PG-13 late Nicolas Cage movie. This is one from 2011 that stands out as, you know, not one of the wacky ones he did. It's a little more straightforward. If anything, that's kind of the only downside to this movie, is you don't get any real classic Nicolas Cage moments out of it, but it still holds up as a pretty excellent medieval supernatural witch flick. But I will say, Season of the Witch, you know, with a PG-13 rating, it's a little formulaic, it's a little bit safe. My next pick is another witch movie that doesn't play anything safe. In fact, it breaks a lot of rules and conventions and ends up a bit sloppy, but I still loved the flavor of Mona Lisa and the Blood Moon.
Why do you think you're in charge?
Now, if that intro didn't explain it enough, this is an art house film. It's a bit loose, it's a bit wild, so I'm really not sure that this is going to appeal to people who don't typically watch artsier films, but if you do, This is a cool one. This is from director Anna Lily Amirpour, who also did A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, a vampire movie from Iran, and The Bad Batch. But in this movie, a young woman with these bizarre, like supernatural mental powers escapes from a mental asylum and then kind of makes her way through New Orleans. And the way it's paced is kind of like a road movie in the sense that she's traveling around in a small radius, but she's traveling around and interacting with these different characters who come and go in and out of the movie with regularity. But comedian Craig Robinson is playing a cop trying to track her down. Ed Skrein plays this sort of Molly-addled guy that's just kind of a wild character. I loved him in this movie. I found like new respect for him as an actor after watching this movie. Same goes for Kate Hudson. She's fantastic in this movie. She plays a prostitute and just like absolutely kills it.
It's a full moon. I like feel it in my ovaries, I swear to God.
This movie's kind of designed to appeal to a specific crowd, but if you think that that might be you, I'm telling you, this one's, again, got a really great flavor to it, even if it's not, like, the best storytelling on this list. Next up, I've got another kind of art house film, but I think this one's got a much broader appeal. In fact, Metallica fans, listen closely. I think you're gonna love Hesher.
Hello there, young man.
Hey, old lady.
TJ, who is this?
My name's Hesher. I'm a friend of your son's.
And no, not just because they ripped off the Metallica logo for the movie logo. The band was actually a big fan of this movie and actually allowed a lot of their music to be played in it, something they don't do very often, or at least they didn't back when this movie came out. In this movie, though, Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays a wild man named Hesher who actually befriends a young boy who had recently lost his mother, who's losing touch with his father, played by Rainn Wilson. And Natalie Portman actually produced this movie. It's one of the first movies she did produce, and she's got a small role in it that's pretty fantastic as well. As you can imagine, this Hesher character makes this kid's life really chaotic, but all of that chaos is kind of how he comes around to cope with his mother's loss, and it has some dark tones and kind of an upsetting story from the jump, but overall, it's actually kind of a surprisingly heartwarming flick. Now, there's over 10 movies left to recommend on this list, but before that, I do want to tell you how today's sponsor is going to help some of you get the best sleep of your life in a really surprising way with Oslo Sleep. Oslo is actually an incredibly unique set of earbuds that are designed specifically for wearing to sleep. You'll notice they feature these squishy little wing tips, and they've got a uniquely flat design for fitting flush inside your ear so that they won't come out at night and they won't press into your ear when you lay on your side. But the Oslo earbuds come pre-loaded with science-backed sleep sounds. That means sounds that are specifically designed to drown out snoring, city noise, loud neighbors. If you've got any of those problems keeping you up at night, this could be a better solution than typical earplugs. And like I said, they're designed for sleep. One of the ways they did that is you literally just slide them open, pop them in, and they start playing your pre-selected sounds right away. And you can change all the settings. You can program them to go off after you fall asleep. They can stay on all night. They're designed to. The battery lasts plenty long for that. But you're not having to futz around with your phone as you're dozing off to sleep. You literally just pop them in and you're done. You can even set an alarm which will wake you up gently and not disturb your partner or anyone else within earshot of your alarm. It's just an interesting gadget that's going to help you get better sleep. Could be a great gift for yourself or maybe for the person you share a bedroom with this holiday season. For a limited time, my viewers can save $10 off their Oslo earbuds when they go to the link in the description or just use this QR code. Just don't forget to use my code FLICK at checkout. Again, that's going to save you $10 off your Oslo Sleep earbuds, something that I've been enjoying that I think can help a lot of you get better sleep. But speaking of things I enjoy, let's get back to the movies on this list. I'll make this next recommendation quick because I know some of you like to skip the family-friendly movies I recommend because I don't do it often, but Journey 2 is a highly underrated family action-adventure movie starring The Rock. It's actually a sequel to Journey to the Center of the Earth starring Brendan Fraser, but to me this one's bigger, better, bolder, and my kids just had an absolute blast watching it. It's kind of like an Indiana Jones movie, but a little softer around the edges. I like recommending it because there's just not a ton of things like this that are action-packed and fun to watch as an adult, but also really fun and entertaining for kids. It's a narrow wheelhouse. But we'll jump from that to a much more serious drama that actually stars Woody Harrelson and Ben Foster in a highly underrated drama titled The Messenger.
His platoon came under sniper fire, and it was an instant death. I'm so sorry.
This actually got 2 Academy Award nominations in 2009, one for Woody Harrelson and one for Best Screenplay. But I gotta say, as good as Woody is in this movie, I think Ben Foster outacts him noticeably in this film. But they play a couple of soldiers tasked with notifying the next of kin that their loved ones have died. So that alone is upsetting enough, but there's actually a bit of story here as well. Ben Foster's character becomes involved with one of the widows, but it's ultimately a pretty heavy and respectful movie. Not one to just throw on when you're looking to be entertained, but if you want to watch a really well done, serious movie, The Messenger is a great one. But, we'll jump to a very not serious movie that I love recommending. In fact, it's a sci-fi vampire flick titled Daybreakers.
Who are you? We're the folks with the crossbows.
This takes place in a future where the world is completely taken over by vampires. There's no humans left. In fact, the only humans left are used as food. They farm them, basically. Kind of like The Matrix. In fact, the movie itself has kind of a Matrix-y aesthetic, but the vampires are in trouble. Their food supply is dwindling as their population has grown, and they've got to figure something out, and they have this new synthetic blood on the market. Meanwhile, Ethan Hawke's vampire character begins to stumble on a conspiracy, and things begin to unravel. And aside from being science fiction with vampires and a really slick aesthetic, it's also got a ton of action in it as well. Willem Dafoe's got a great little role in it. If you like vampire stuff at all, I think Daybreakers holds up there with a lot of the classics like John Carpenter's Vampires. Near Dark is another one I love recommending on this channel. If you like those and have somehow never seen Daybreakers, make it the first one you watch off of this list. My number 10 pick is the only movie on this list I believe that I've recommended somewhat recently, and that's because it's available on some other streaming services, like right here. But Copshop is a really unique action movie. Gerard Butler plays a guy who gets himself thrown into jail in order to go after somebody. Kind of a setup we've seen before, but this is all taking place in kind of a small jail and actually has a lot in common with Assault on Precinct 13. In fact, I love Copshop way more than the Assault on Precinct 13 remake they did years back. I say years back, it's almost 2 decades ago they did that remake, but Copshop not only features a lot of bloody action, but it has some interesting characters. Now, Gerard Butler's one of them. I love his character in this movie. Toby Huss plays an assassin.
You say you fell?
Yeah. Well, to clarify, I shot him in the head and then he took a little tumble.
People from my generation either know him as the Wiz from Seinfeld.
Here's the fact. I'm the Wiz.
Or Artie.
The strongest man. For the world.
He made this movie for me. I absolutely loved his character. He's the reason I will rewatch this movie again in the future, 100%. But for a relatively small action movie, meaning it takes place in one location and doesn't have, a huge budget, I had an absolute blast with Copshop.
Somebody help this man! He's gonna die!
Now, another pretty serious movie that also stars Ben Foster, well, doesn't star him, he's got a meaty role in it though, also happens to be the second of only 2 westerns that Christian Bale has ever done, Hostiles.
I don't know how you've done all these years. Seeing all the things you've seen, doing all the things you've done, makes you feel inhuman after a while.
Now this one too gets kind of long and I think maybe loses the plot a little bit, but I loved everything else that was going on in this movie so much, I still highly recommend it. In fact, this movie establishes some pretty intense fear of Native Americans, something you don't see in movies that much anymore, and I was actually surprised to see how intensely they portrayed it in this movie. But it also touches on, I thought, some interesting elements of this period of American history. Times where we're kind of trying to civilize the country, and there's multiple moments in this movie where the main characters could just much more easily do something awful, and they choose not to. They choose to try to, I don't know, move the country forward in a more civilized manner. I'm being kind of cagey about it because I don't want to spoil any of the big moments in the movie, but it does have something to say and is also a really, well done frontier flick. It's just not the sharpest in terms of the way it delivers the story. Just not the sharpest. It's not really, that's not a criticism. I've just got some sharper movies, towards the #1 spot on this list. Next up, I've got a dynamite thriller from South Korea that actually stars Chung Jung-seo, who was also in Mona Lisa and the Blood Moon. She was also the star of Ballerina, my favorite Netflix original movie of 2023. Longtime subscribers have seen me recommend that flick before. But she also stars in Burning, and she's just amazing in all three of them. I think she's just fantastic. But Steven Yeun from The Walking Dead actually steals the show in Burning, and neither one of them are the main character. The main character here, though, is actually kind of an introverted young man who has always had a thing for this girl. They grew up together, and when she has a kind of hot new boyfriend with all this money, they all three start spending time together. Now, Steven Yeun, he plays the hotshot boyfriend, and again, he's just incredible, but the main character here starts to suspect that there's something up with this guy. Now, the thing that's so great about Burning is its slow pace, and it is an almost painfully slow pace, but it ends up making this movie work so damn well. Now, on Tubi, you will have to read subtitles for this one. If you typically do that, though, I'm telling you, this is one of the best, most realistic thrillers I've seen from South Korea. I say that because they make some incredible thrillers that are big and over the top. This is a subtle one that just blew me away. The legendary Michael Shannon makes the list with a legendary performance in a movie that was just criminally overlooked, The Iceman. Now, in this movie, Michael Shannon portrays the real-life contract killer that did a lot of work for the mob. He was affectionately referred to as the Iceman, and when you watch the movie, you will understand why. But when he was ultimately arrested, his family had no idea what he had been up to all these years. And I'll say, as far as movies about mob hitmen go, I think The Iceman is better than Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, at least in the sense that it's more entertaining and it has less than half of the runtime. But not only is Michael Shannon great, you got an incredible supporting cast, including a very small role from Chris Evans that is really surprising. Honestly, anyone who loves mob movies, if you miss this gem, make it the first one you watch off of this list. But my #6 pick is a little-known thriller that I used to recommend all the time when it was available on Netflix. It left Netflix a couple of years ago, but you can catch it on Tubi for free right now, and it's titled The Invitation.
We don't see you for 2 years, and then all of a sudden, we get invited to this lavish dinner. Don't tell me that this is normal.
Logan Marshall Green stars in this as a man who makes the mistake of going to a dinner party at his ex-wife's house. When he and his date get there, everyone's acting strange. There's a kind of a culty vibe that they're putting out. And that's not really a spoiler. I mean, they are putting cult vibes out there from the first few minutes of this movie. So the movie has a fairly simple concept, but the direction here is pitch perfect. You're often at the edge of your seat in a way where the main character doesn't really know, is he right about these people? Is he maybe off base? He's got this internal turmoil, and the filmmaking brings that to life perfectly. You are in the hot seat with this guy. You are not sure if he should speak up, if he should stay quiet, and it's just a wild ride for 90 minutes and has a hell of a payoff if you wait to the end. But even after all that gushing, we've got 5 more flicks on this list, and my #5 pick is a documentary titled 3 Identical Strangers.
That's when things kinda got funky.
Now, people in the New York, New Jersey area maybe grew up hearing this story about 3 identical twins who were separated at birth and then found each other in their college years. These guys kind of went on to become somewhat local celebrities. They owned restaurants. It's a whole thing. And the documentary does a great job of sharing the story of how these 3 different families sort of came together. And it also shares a lot of details about how these guys were incredibly similar to each other, despite growing up in completely different worlds. Yet ultimately, the documentary goes into how they're different from each other, and that's where, some of the heartbreak comes in. This documentary is actually surprisingly profound in more ways than one, and I think it sheds a bright light on nature versus nurture. That's just kind of a concept that's a little bit elusive to us still, and 3 Identical Strangers, I think, did more to explain that to me, with myself and the people I know, than I think anything I've ever seen before. I can't recommend this documentary enough.
Oh my God.
But my number 4 pick is one of the more well-known movies on this list, or at least, my top 4 picks are somewhat well-known, but I still think criminally underrated, starting with Cormac McCarthy's The Road. Now, there are a lot of post-apocalyptic movies out there. In fact, it's a genre I'm quite fond of. But The Road is possibly the most realistic one ever created, to the point that it's quite upsetting. It feels so real. And the movie overall is such a downer that after watching it once, it's one of those movies you may never want to watch again. But I'm telling you, it's one that I shelved. After I saw it in the theater, I was actually kind of upset. Not that I was disappointed, but it's a truly, deeply upsetting movie. Years later, I went back and I've revisited this movie multiple times, and it is just incredible. The cinematography is amazing. The world building they do with this post-apocalyptic landscape is remarkable. And then ultimately, this movie also has something to say. Now, obviously, Cormac McCarthy's book had something to say, but the filmmaking ultimately brings it to life. And even if you don't quite get it on that first watch, I'm telling you, there is enough there for this movie to really get its hooks in you and stay there for a while. Another one, it's not really entertaining. It's not one to just put on when you want to have a blast, but it's top-notch filmmaking, and it says something ultimately, I think, pretty important. And then the other one of 2 movies on this list that you will have to read subtitles for, but it is a horror movie. We're going to use quotes with horror because it's not quite, you'd be disappointed if you went into this one with horror, but in terms of like hidden gem horror lists, you're going to find Audition on almost every one of those, and you're going to find it near the top of every one of those lists that you Google. This is from legendary director Takashi Miike, a director who has done like over 100 movies like this, movies that are dark and bloody and, just... He's got some great ones, but Audition is probably his highest rated movie ever. The story here centers around a wealthy man who holds auditions for women to become his wife. And through this process, he finds a beautiful woman that he thinks he can just love forever, and she feels the same way, and when things begin to change, this woman actually is capable of some pretty nightmarish things. Now, this movie is also a slow-paced one, and you're gonna have to read subtitles through it, but it ultimately goes somewhere that's not only terrifying, but it's incredibly well directed, and it's unlike anything else I can think of. I'll say, fans of Oldboy, if you love that movie, you definitely need to see Audition. And then my number 2 pick is probably the biggest, most famous movie on this list, but I still love recommending it and still think it's highly underrated. The Edge, starring Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin. This is from writer David Mamet, who's probably most famous for Glengarry Glen Ross, also starring Alec Baldwin. And he's a writer that writes men particularly well, or at least powerful men, or even more specifically, men that like to exert their power. He writes them very well, and not only is that really a lot of what Glengarry Glen Ross is about, but you also get that same element in The Edge, on top of it being one of the best wilderness survival movies of all time. Anthony Hopkins really just, he's easily one of like the top 3 actors of all time This isn't his greatest role, but you can see it on display in this movie. Like, Alec Baldwin is great, but Anthony Hopkins acts circles around him in this movie. And the movie's nearly 30 years old, and I think still holds up today as an excellent watch that honestly doesn't feel dated, aside from, the people in it look younger than they do today. But my number one pick is one that has been a number one pick on this channel before. It's been a long time since I talked about it, though. It, in some ways, is a modern day Western, or at least it was modern day back when this movie came out over 20 years ago.
Are you still with me? Yeah.
Now, this is one that was criminally overlooked from its launch. Like, it bombed at the box office and has taken 20 years for it to kind of catch up and become culturally significant. But the director here, Chris McQuarrie, has gone on to do like the latest Mission Impossible movies. He's done like the last 4, and they're all fantastic. Some of the best in the whole series. And you can see that skill with The Way of the Gun. There are so many sequences in this movie that are just expertly executed with a small, almost micro budget. This is another one for mob movie lovers. James Caan has a really great role in this. But it's about a couple of bandits that kidnap a pregnant woman. She's actually a surrogate mother for a wealthy family, and they decide to hold her ransom. The movie's got a hard edge to it. Real hard, and it's from the start. There's an opening sequence with Sarah Silverman that's one of the more vulgar things you're gonna see, not just on this list, but like on Tubi right now.
Listen to me! Get off the f***ing car with your f***ing ass!
Shut that mouth or I'll come over there and start her head.
And that's just how the movie starts, and it's not just all vulgarity. It's entertaining, it's compelling, and then you end up with one of the greatest shootout sequences in modern cinematic history is in this little movie. It's the final 20 minutes of the film, and it's just absolutely amazing. Thanks again to Oslo Sleep for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check out their link down in the description, and don't forget to use my code FLICK if you want to save that $10. But I will keep making these lists as long as y'all keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this special underrated list, and you will see me on the next one.